Are you getting a little bogged down in your model building? Maybe it's time to consider a genre change. It sure helped me. For the last few years, I've pretty much built nothing but sci-fi models. There have been a few exceptions, but all the videos I've done have been focused on those. Now, when I was growing up, I built airplanes and tanks and cars and battleships and science fiction stuff. And, I even remember building some dinosaurs and things like that. So as a kid, I built a wide variety of things. But when I got back into the hobby in 2006, I tended to focus on just airplanes. From 2006 to about 2016, it was almost all 1/48 scale single engine World War II fighters. I built over 275, it was 276, 277, somewhere in there, aircraft in that time. About 84 of those were Spitfires. So it was a constant stream of 1/48 scale aircraft, and mostly World War II. There were a few jets in there, but it was mostly World War II. And at the time, I really enjoyed it. But things started changing a little bit in 2016. Now, I think the catalyst for my change started with things that were external to modeling. There were a lot of pressures and things in my own life apart from modeling. But it began to show some cracks in my enjoyment of the hobby. And I've always been about enjoy the hobby. That's been my thing from the very beginning. I don't know that I articulated it this way back years ago, but it's always been, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. I've always been a big advocate for fun. But things outside of the hobby started affecting my hobby work and started showing some cracks, and I started realizing I don't know that I'm having the fun that I used to have. For one thing, I had gotten bogged down in doing commission builds. I had started a few years back selling my models on eBay, and then eventually somebody contacted me and said, "Can you do a commission build?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And I did more and more and more of those until eventually pretty much all of the building I was doing was for commission builds. I rarely, if ever, did one that I thought, okay, this is just one that I want to do. And as much as I loved aircraft, I started feeling burned out on building aircraft. I tried switching over to doing a few jets and tried going outside of my comfort zone in aircraft, but it didn't hold the allure for me that it had previously. I've always loved airplanes, but it just wasn't doing it for me anymore. Another thing that I was struggling with at the time was this growing realization that while I felt I was fairly well competent in building aircraft and the skills that went along with that, I realized that the methods I was employing, the techniques I was using, all of those things were beginning to stagnate. I was just doing the same thing over and over again. Building for commission meant it was kind of a production line, and so I just started having a certain set of steps that I just started doing, didn't think about it, and there was no growth, there was no creativity. And I started looking around at some things that were happening in the model world, just pictures that people were posting, styles that were coming out, products that were being used, and I realized my skills are really starting to stagnate badly. The big deciding factor, though, was when I realized I wasn't having fun, I actually started thinking, okay, I probably just need to get out of the hobby. It's about time to get out of the hobby. And I was seriously considering it. I was starting to inventory the equipment that I had, the models that I had, thinking about how do I sell these, what else can I do as an alternative hobby, something to keep my time, keep my brain engaged. And I really began seriously thinking I'm no longer going to be in the hobby. And that kind of was the tipping point to say, maybe I just need to make a change. Now, maybe I'm crazy, but I tend to talk to myself a lot, and sometimes myself answers. That's weird. Anyway, I begin talking to myself, okay, maybe if you try something else. And I looked at some of the traditional things. I looked at armor, and I looked at ships and, cars, but none of it really grabbed me. But I started looking at these things now at the time I didn't know anything about them, but those things called Gundam. And all I knew was they were some kind of snap-tight pre-colored kit that had something to do with Japanese anime, and they just kind of looked cool. But I had no idea what any of them were. I didn't have any idea about scales, what the names meant, anything like that. So what I did was I took a trip to a local model shop that had those in stock, and my criteria was finding one that looked cool and was cheap. And I found one called a Gray's Custom. It was in 1/144 scale, an HG kit. If you're familiar with Gunpla, you'll know what that is. And I just took it home and I thought, okay, I'm just going to build this with no expectations. I'm not going to paint it. I'm not going to weather it. I'm just going to snap it up like it's intended to be done and see what I think of it. So I snapped it up in a weekend. In fact, it only took a few hours. And I had a lot of fun. I'm, posing him and making pew, pew, pew shooty sounds. And, I didn't know anything about it, but I thought, hey, this was kind of fun. And I thought, well, this is snap tight. Let me take it back apart. So I took it apart. And then I started doing some basic painting on it. And then I took it apart again. And I primed it. And I did more of a proper paint job and weathering and stuff like that. And I thought, hey, this is kind of fun. Now, once I started building that one, I started paying attention to Gunpla builders on YouTube. And as I started paying attention to that, I started running into things like Warhammer 40K, which I had never even really paid any attention to, Bandai Star Wars, other sci-fi stuff, Machining Krieger. And I began building more and more of these kits and exploring the sci-fi genre. And it really brought this breath of fresh air into the hobby, which I was about ready to exit. And it was just a time I was very excited. It was a time of great fun and excitement and just kind of, hey, y'all, look what I got. I was like a kid with a new toy. But the best thing were some of the other things that came along with that change. One of the first things that happened as I made the genre change was discovering new creators. And I would go on YouTube and find, different people that produced models and made videos about them. And they showed their techniques and their products and things like that. And it was a completely different group of creators than the ones I was familiar with in the aircraft world. I started seeing people that were building Gunpla and reviewing Gunpla and building Machining Krieger and showing how to do Machining Krieger and building the Bandai Star Wars. And that's what they tended to focus on exclusively. And I started seeing more and more of the way they did things and why they did things. And it really began to hook me, and it started feeding that need that I had for getting out of that stagnation that I had been feeling. Within just a few weeks, I had identified many areas that I had never been challenged in when I was building aircraft, and part of that was my own fault, I guess you'd say, but I'd never been challenged in when it came to building aircraft. And it began to expose the cracks in my skill set. Now, I was very comfortable with using an airbrush, putting camouflage on aircraft, weathering aircraft for the style that was appropriate for them. But many other things I had neglected. My brush painting skills were almost non-existent. Heavier weathering kind of thing, using various mud effects and rust effects and things like that. I just never used any of those. So that exposure to different skills really broke me out of that funk that I was in and helped me focus back on the fun. Well, the focus on those areas of skills and other creators and how they applied them introduced me to a lot of new products that I had not ever even thought about using. It wasn't so much that I hadn't heard of them, but a lot of them simply just weren't something that I tended to use or see used in aircraft modeling. So exposure to new products and the techniques for applying those products really became a whole area of fun that I could focus on, that I could learn, that I could expand in. And it along with everything else, it continued to just breathe new life into my enjoyment of the hobby. It was like every week I was finding some new product that I had maybe heard of, or somebody had talked about, but I'd never even considered using. And now I'm getting it, and how do I apply it? How do I make use of it? When should I use it? When should I not use it? What do other people use it for? How do they use it? And it really, really just began to expand my horizons far beyond what I ever thought could happen when I picked up that first Gunpla. Now, that first Gunpla model that I talked about building, it was back in August of 2017, and it didn't take too long. I mean, just really a few weeks that my excitement and enthusiasm for the hobby returned. In fact, not only did it return, it exceeded what I had felt in previous years. It really, in many ways, I kind of went nuts about Gunpla for a little while, but I was having so much fun with those. And as I began adding in the other genres and trying all these techniques, and I was watching YouTube videos and trying products, the fun just came flooding back in. And I really began to enjoy the hobby again. And that is really what it's all about. Because just a few months before, I was so down in the hobby, partly based on things external to the hobby, but it had spilled over into the hobby. But it was dragging me down to the point that, like I said, I was thinking of just walking away from it, just giving it up entirely. But this process of genre change just brought it all back. And that momentum has carried through because I did learn some lessons from it to try different things and to explore different genres and not look at something and say, nah, that's something I don't think I'll ever build. If I look at it and I think it looks cool, maybe I ought to build that. To put it in just a simple manner, I realized I was doing it wrong because I wasn't having fun. And when I began having fun, I realized I'm no longer doing it wrong. I'm doing the hobby in a way that is fun and enjoyable, and I was growing in it and looking forward to it and anticipating it. And it made a complete 180 change in my mood, and even improved things outside of the hobby because the enthusiasm I felt in the hobby spilled over outside of what I was doing and just kind of helped in so many ways. Now, I've spent most of this time, I know, talking about my own journey, I guess you would say, in the hobby, my own genre change. But I think it's important that I lay that groundwork so that in these last few minutes, I can kind of focus on what I learned and how it may be something for you to consider that might help you out in your enjoyment of the hobby. Now, right off the bat, I need to say I'm not suggesting that everybody completely change the genre they build in. I mean, I made a radical change from, World War II aircraft guy to sci-fi guy. And it even shocked a lot of my friends. They were like, what are you doing? You're not building Spitfires anymore? So for me, it was a fairly jarring change, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way for everybody. It may just be a temporary thing where you think, well, I'm getting a little stagnated in what I'm doing. I'm not quite enjoying whatever it is I've been building. So let me pick something else that's different. And let me build that and let me explore that. And it may just be kind of a single model thing. It may mean just a change in genre every now and again. Maybe you build tanks a lot, but you decide, I've built nothing but tanks and I'm feeling a little slowed down in that. Let me try an airplane. Let me try something machining Krieger. Let me try a boat. something that's just a little different. And then you go back to what you've been doing and you just use it as a refresher. And like I mentioned in my own journey, this genre change exposed me to a lot of different modelers that I had never heard of before, that I probably never would have encountered. And so, if you are going to say, well, let me try this other thing that I've not done before, fully explore it. Get on Google and do some searches. Get on YouTube and do some searches. Watch different creators who do that, whether they're showing how to do specific techniques or use specific products on whatever type of model you're looking at building, or whether they're just showing, here's how I built this model or that model. Or maybe it's a case of finding somebody who's just talking about their own thoughts about building the model, kind of like I'm doing in this video. But any of those things are going to help you explore that genre and really wring the most out of it to get something from it that's going to benefit whatever it is you're trying to do, whether it's a complete genre change or just a bit of a refresh in what you're already doing. Another thing that it will do for you is if you're fully pursuing, okay, how do people do this? What are other people showing? Is it's going to give you the opportunity to maybe explore some new products and techniques and skills that you might not currently be doing in whatever genre you're working in. I know it did for me. I knew about oils and enamels and acrylics and various painting styles. I knew about these things, but I had never really used some of those products or used them to any great extent or tried other techniques. Even though I'd seen them, I hadn't tried them. For example, there was brush painting. I'd always done a little bit of brush painting, in the cockpit of an aircraft. There's little dots and dials and, minor brush painting. But to brush paint an entire model, I'd never done that. So, and doing so expanded my skills, expanded my abilities. And as I begin to do that, it began to just spin that positive cycle up of where you have fun. And when you have fun, you want to do more. And when you do more, you learn more. When you learn more, you have fun. And it just keeps going. So that process of really seeing what are other people in this genre doing, what styles are they doing, what methods and techniques, what skills do I not have that this can help build up, that maybe I keep going in this genre, or that I apply back to what I've been doing before and make those even better. Now, one of the most beneficial things that I've gotten through this genre change, and that I think you might have the same experience if you think about doing this, is getting to meet a whole new group of people that do different models than what you may have been involved in before. I was very engaged in aircraft modeling forums and groups and things like that. But when I made the genre change, I discovered this whole new group of people that I would have never encountered before, and different ways of doing things, and made new friends. And now many of those friends that are in the sci-fi genre that I've made are as close as my aircraft building friends that I've been knowing for years. So it really expanded my circle of friends. And I don't mean that in just the artificial kind of, well, I have, 300 friends on my Facebook list and, and some people give me likes, but people that I'm in contact with weekly or even daily, just to talk and see what they're doing. And quite often, you know how that goes, quite often it expands outside of modeling, and, you start getting involved in how are they doing, what's going on in their world, what's going on in your world. And it's just been, I think, kind of the glue that has cemented it all together. Cemented it. How many EDs are on the end of cemented it? I've lost my ability to speak. But it's been the glue that's pulled everything together. And it's really kind of that intangible element that's made the whole thing far more fun than I think just the sum of the parts of what I've gone through in changing genres and learning about it and applying those skills and having more fun. It's really just been a booster to push that up to a whole different level. Now, I know this has been another one of those videos where it's just a whole bunch of, blah, 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 me talking about some things that I think about, and I apologize for that. But I thank you for tolerating it, and for if you're still watching at this point, for continuing to watch it. I appreciate that. And again, I'm not suggesting that, if you're heavily involved in one genre, and certainly if you're enjoying it, there's probably not a reason to change. Maybe some of the skills development areas, if you start looking at other genres that may have different skill sets that they focus on, at least exploring those from a skill set standpoint can be helpful. Even if you're not building in that genre, maybe you pull some of the skill sets that are needed for that genre and apply them to what you're doing. I think it can have a beneficial effect even if you're enjoying what you're doing. But if you're getting bogged down in what you're doing, you're not enjoying it, you find that you're not building models, you're mostly collecting them, and you're just kind of staring at them, maybe it's time to build something different. Paint something different, use some different techniques, look at some different creators, get on some different groups, some different forums, and see what's out there and see what you may be missing out on. It completely transformed the hobby for me. Well, again, thank you so much for watching this video. I am super grateful, especially for those who are still, like I said, watching here at the end. That's always a small but elite group of people who hang around to the very end. I look at those analytics and, you get about 3 minutes in and it just goes just like that. But thank you for hanging around here and for watching. I hope this has given you something to think about, something to ponder, even if it's just tucking it away for perhaps future use. You're thinking, hey, I'm happy in what I'm doing now. I'm pursuing skills. I'm doing all of those things. I'm happy. I don't need to do this. Even if it just gives you something to kind of do a gut check and tuck away for future thought to see, would that be beneficial? I hope it has been. Well, I'd be most grateful if you would click the subscribe button down over here and hit the little bell icon so you can know when I have new videos come out. I try to have a new video out every Friday. Last couple of years I've been successful at that, so I hope that continues. And also, if you would drop a comment down below and leave this video a like. I'm trying to grow this channel, and that really helps get the notice of the YouTube algorithm. So every comment, every like, every subscribe, every bell icon, they all add up. It's pennies in the jar, but eventually, you know how it is. You throw enough pennies in the jar and you got dinner at the Olive Garden in there. There's also links down below to support what I do through either Patreon, which is down below, or there's a join button right over here for YouTube if you would like to support the work that I do. You can click on those and find out the details of what is offered for that support, and I'll be most grateful for your consideration. It's 5 o'clock in the morning, y'all. I'm still trying to get awake. The coffee hadn't kicked in yet. And if you're already a supporter, thank you so much for your support, because you make what I do possible. I always say it, and I always mean it, and I think it bears repeating. I couldn't do this if it weren't for y'all that are supporting me. Thank you so much. It's a blessing to me, and it's a blessing to my family. And finally, to boil it all down like I always like to do at the end of every video, in this hobby, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye.